Hello and welcome to the News 9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News 9 Plus. The Justice K Hema Committee report has uncovered some of the darkest secrets of the Malayalam film industry. And now, women of the industry have leveled sexual assault complaints against male actors, including prominent figures in the film industry. The police have registered 17 cases of sexual abuse and harassment. The governing body, the Association of Malayalam Movie Artists, or Amma for short, the association that should have looked into all of these complaints, now has its own members facing accusations of abuse. The whole body, including its president, superstar Mohanlal, have resigned on moral grounds. Now, the Hema Committee report seems to suggest a wider circle of abusers in the industry. Is this then just a tip of the iceberg? Is this about the dirty old men of the Malayalam film industry? Is the report a battle for the soul of the industry that's been a trendsetter for Indian cinema? And is there hope for reform? Joining me to discuss this are film critic Anna Vetticad and activist Brinda Adige. Welcome to the News 9 Plus show. Anna, I want to start by asking you this. You know, the irony of it all, an association that an acronym with an acronym like Amma is itself now accused of shielding some of the biggest perpetrators of this, old, dirty old men, this circle of abusers that this report has uncovered. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, this is actually one of the reasons why many activists in Kerala have specifically been asking people not to use the acronym Amma.
Yes.
Because it gives that impression of being maternalistic and a guardian, and really that's not the role that the organization has played for a very long time. However, Sandeep, because I listened to your introduction, I want to emphasize that the Justice Hema Committee report is not only about sexual harassment and violence.
Yes.
This is something that the Women in Cinema Collective has emphasized repeatedly. When they asked for an expert study on the Malayalam film industry,
Yes.
they are not looking for only investigations into possible sexual harassment and violence.
Yes.
They wanted to look at the underlying causes, and they wanted to look at gender discrimination in general. And sexual harassment and violence is, while it is a significant part of the study's report's findings,
Yes.
it is not its entirety, nor is it even 50% of it. There is a lot of space devoted in the study
Yes.
to working conditions, pay disparities, the inequities across the industry, and gender discrimination of all sorts, including, there's a very beautiful section that has been authored by Valsala Kumari, who is a
Yes.
retired bureaucrat and one of the members of the committee, who explains in detail the sociological and political reasons why women get paid less for their work, even in a creative field like Malayalam. Now, that less pay disparity means less power. It
Yes.
also means less. Also, we know that all Indian film industries write very few stories centered around women,
Yes.
which means less women who are as big stars as the men. That again means a power inequity, which means the working conditions of the women are far poorer than that of the men. Having said that, the committee also, it could be very beneficial to men in the industry, because
Yes.
there are men also who've deposed before it and
Yes.
spoken about their own problems. So it's a very wide-ranging study.
Absolutely.
Sexual harassment and violence is, of course, an important part of it, but it's not its entirety.
It's not, absolutely, Anna. In fact, it's one of the most comprehensive reports of the kind. I don't recall reading a report of this nature, which not only talks about, of course, sexual harassment is the most extreme end of this, but you know, the wider ramifications of working conditions, like you mentioned, and the fact that it's also talks a lot about the Indian film industry in general, which has very, very poor representation of female directors, producers, scriptwriters, and technicians across the industry. So it's actually something that's a wake-up call for not just Malayalam cinema, but also for the rest of the industry. But, I want to ask Brinda this. Brinda, you've been covering this for a couple of years now, this whole progress of the very, very disturbing allegations against a very leading star of the Malayalam film industry in 2017, who was also incidentally a member, he was the treasurer of the Amma. Had it not been for that one sensational case in 2017, would all of these allegations have been brushed under the carpet? You know, this all began with that case in 2017, and after which you had this committee set up, you had them doing all these depositions, interviewing members of the film industry. How important was that incident from 2017, 7 years ago?
There is no doubt that that was a very, very important, sad to say, an incident where the victim survivor chose to come out and speak. We are largely a patriarchal country, so silencing the woman is a given. There is no way, it does not matter which strata, which section, which religion, which caste one belongs to. Women must be silenced, and a woman who speaks up is always pointed out to be told as a troublemaker, as somebody we must stay far away from. Now that done, if somebody is branded like that, then there is a lot of other ramifications and consequences, because they will not get a job, they won't be easily called for any other assignments, and people will try that the scripts might change and say, okay, she's dead now, you'll put somebody else. So there we have seen that this is a culture of silence that has continuously been promoted, and let us put on record that case is very important. But whatever has come out from the Justice Hema Committee report is across India. No film industry can claim to be holier than thou, or say that any one part of that report doesn't affect them or is not part of their industry. And that said, the 2017 case, we know what all went through it and what happened to the actor also. And the kind of malign, the character assassination, the statements made not only by men, but women also made those statements, using words like compromises, you behave to be available. So we are a patriarchal country, conditioned by patriarchy with a gendered language that men and women both have no qualms continuously using it. In all of those, in that light, you see that the Justice Hema Committee is a torchbearer.
It's a torchbearer indeed, Brinda. Yes, it's a trailblazer, and it's a report of the kind that we should have had many years ago. And in fact, I'm going to ask Anna this. Anna, you're a film critic, you're a film scholar who's covered the entire Indian film industry, not just the so-called Bollywood based in Bombay, but also the southern film industry. How rampant is this in other industries as well? The point that Brinda made is that it could be any industry in the country today. It could be Bollywood, it could be the Bengal film industry as well. How much of this is known? How much of a conspiracy of silence is there in the other industries for this to not come out?
I'm so glad Brinda made this point, because the fact is that if any industry tries to act holier than thou, it needs to be pointed out to them that there is no Indian film industry that is free of the conditions and the violence and the harassment that women have spoken of to the Justice Hema Committee. The difference between the Malayalam film industry and the rest of the country is that one woman, a very famous woman actor, immediately after a crime, decided to file a police complaint. Because of that one woman, the women of the Malayalam film industry banded together and formed a collective. That is the big difference between Malayalam and the rest of the country. Because they banded together, and you know what, I think the government and the industry thought this is just a sweet photo op for all of them, and these cute little girls will get tired of fighting after a while. But the thing about the Women in Cinema Collective, headquartered in Kerala, is that they refused to give up. They were unrelenting. Even after the Justice K Hema Committee was formed, you know that the committee submitted its findings in 2019, and for 5 years the government sat on those findings. And I am so glad just as that one woman gave courage to the women of the Malayalam film industry, and the Women in Cinema Collective's courage has given courage to other women and even men in the Malayalam film industry. I can see that the Bengal film industry's women are now speaking out.
Right.
Of course, the challenges are bigger for women of the Hindi, Telugu, and Tamil industries in the sense that because they are bigger industries, they have more money to spend on PR and marketing. Therefore, powerful men in those industries have more money to spend on agents who will coach them on how to be more sophisticated in the way they approach women and in their public statements, even about the Hema Committee. Having said that, if you've noticed, it is women of Bengal who've spoken up. But the men of all the big industries are silent. And I can tell you, because I have, like you said, I've covered all of these industries, they are afraid that because it'll take just one woman speaking out in one of the big industries for again there to be another ripple effect. And the men of the big industries of Kerala, of India, the big film industries, are all afraid right now. Everything described in the Hema Committee report, I can tell you, is happening in all the other industries also.
Absolutely, and that's a very, very, a shocking statement indeed, and it's a truth. If you look at the report, what it suggests that this could actually be universal across film industries in India. But Anna, there have been two very important actors who have spoken out in the Malayalam film industry as well. Prithviraj Sukumaran has come out and he's spoken in favor of the women who've registered those complaints, and of course Tovino Thomas has spoken out as well, which actually leads me to believe that there is possibly a generational divide in the Malayalam film industry itself, because a lot of the actors who are accused, the 17 cases, many of them are against the old film industry of Kerala, men who are in their 50s and 60s who've been around for 2 or 3 decades, and the younger actors seem to have come out and spoken more openly. Do you believe that's the case, Anna, in the Malayalam film industry? Is that there's a generational divide in the way the young industry looks at it and vis-a-vis the old guard looks at it?
I actually do not think that there's a generational divide. Prithviraj Sukumaran and Tovino Thomas have been supporters of the Women in Cinema Collective and the survivor in the 2017 case from the beginning. I do want to call out Prithviraj on one thing though. While he welcomed the findings of the Hema Committee this month, he felt the need to emphasize that if there are false cases, then of course action should be taken against the women who file false cases. When we know that the world over, this bogey of false cases is raised to intimidate women and tell them that they could be punished if they are not able to provide proof for crimes that are in any case usually committed behind closed doors and that are always difficult to prove. And we also know that false cases are a tiny percentage of the sexual crimes reported in this world, but patriarchal men persist in highlighting those all the time just to create doubt about women in general. Having said that, Prithviraj has been an avid supporter of WCC for a while. The WCC themselves have spoken out and said so. I don't think there's a generational divide as much as the fact that men of an earlier generation knew they could get away with things a little more easily than men of the present generation, because women of the present generation have more platforms on which to speak out. There are laws that are stronger. So I don't think that Tovino and Prithviraj support should be taken as representative of the entire young brigade in the film industry, because there are many, for instance, young filmmakers, young male filmmakers in Kerala making extremely regressive, anti-women, misogynistic films. And so yes, I would not give the entire generation the benefit of the doubt. Prithvi and Tovino, yes. I appreciate, everyone should appreciate allyship, but again, first and foremost, it is the bravery, the courage, and the unity of the Women in Cinema Collective that has resulted in everything that we are seeing right now. That has to be underlined first and foremost.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a one-of-a-kind organization, and Anna, possibly Bollywood never had a WCC, despite all the complaints that came out many years ago in 2017. So, Brinda, the fact that the report also mentions the possibility of the women of the WCC being targeted, by not giving them work, by sidelining them, by dropping them from projects. Do you see that happening? Do you see the industry kind of, coming together in this thing of solidarity, the dirty old men club, if you can call it that, waiting for the storm to pass and then kind of, working against the WCC? Or do you think it's now too big for them to even attempt that?
Well, I would like to think that it is too big for them to attempt that, but we know, like Anna pointed out, they are very powerful, they are moneyed.
Yes.
And right now we know that they have the prerogative and the kind of influence that they can wield to say, okay, these are people we do not want in our projects, and they can give you n number of very, very justifiable reasons. But that said, we now want to ask whether other women will fall prey to something like this.
Right, right.
Will there be a possibility that they all come together under the WCC and say that you cannot pick and choose people who may not call out, who may not stand up, and who may not voice out? That is asking for utopia, but I'm sure, because today women know that we must come together if we
Yes.
have to fight this eons old patriarchal shattering battle. So, and here we also want to talk about the kind of behavior, the resources, the infrastructure, and everything that must be provided. So women who might get chosen or selected must understand that they might be at loss of all of that, including higher pay grades and whatever that other their male counterparts are getting. So if everybody is there together, I'm sure they might be able to get the most optimum and best of it. That said, we must also place the onus on the state. The report is there, cases are being registered, and like Anna pointed out, there are almost all of them coming out and saying that, we'll go to court because of maligning my character, we'll do this. All those threats will continue.
Yes.
And that is why it is important that as soon as the police register the FIR, the victim and the witness protection scheme is coming into play. Otherwise, what you mentioned, not only jobs over here, but
Yes.
wherever they might have the connections, those jobs may be at stake.
Right, absolutely. And it's so important that you highlighted the role of the Women in Cinema Collective, because we forget that it was actually civil society and indeed the brave women of the WCC that fought this battle for so many years and resulted in what we see today, the report being made public. But Anna, you're a film scholar. Give us the big picture now. How do you see this playing out in the next couple of months? Do you see the ripple effect of what the WCC has fought, this battle that they have fought, this very extraordinary battle that they fought in the Malayalam film industry, actually rippling through the other film industries as well? That predators in other industries are now going to be on their guard, say that, listen, tomorrow they might come for me. Or is it going to be business as usual? Give us your take on this.
I don't think I can make a prediction on this, because we know that patriarchy worldwide is about powerful men closing ranks,
Yes.
along with, of course, the support of a few women enablers and supporting each other in situations like this. And you need look no further than the Me Too movement in the United States, which
Yes.
began in Hollywood in October 2017, a few months after the Women in Cinema Collective was formed in Kerala.
Yes.
Please go back to an article in The Atlantic, which was published on the first anniversary of the Me Too movement. It was published in 2018 October, and the headline was, "The Men of Me Too Go Back to Work."
Right.
Apart from Harvey Weinstein, who has faced consequences, who are the others whose careers you see completely ruined despite numerous women coming out and speaking of the violence that they have inflicted on their women colleagues? They're just going about business as usual. And so the reason why, I think the reason why WCC has been able to stick around and make a difference is, of course, the women in that group are just incredible. Beena Paul, Didi Damodran,
Yes.
Asha Chi Joseph, Sajita Martal, Reema Parvati. I can't name all of them. They are incredibly courageous. They have lost work. This is not speculation. They have come on the record and said in the past 7 years that they have lost work for speaking out. But they stuck together. And second, the media and the society in Kerala, whatever their flaws might be, by and large, they stood by the women. There has been public support. Initially, the government supported WCC. When it seemed like the government is not, the public continued to support them.
Right.
So, while it's about brave women, the fact is that the onus cannot be placed on women. Society and the media have to support them. So the question is is the media going to support women in the Hindi film industry, the Telugu industry, and the Tamil industry, or Marathi, or any of the others, if the biggest of names are named, and men we grew up loving turn out to be sexual predators, as someone who's observed the industry from behind, I can tell you that there are many who are known to be, but they're known to be behind the scenes. Will the public support women who speak out publicly against the most beloved stars of India's beloved industries in the way Kerala society has stood by the women of the Women in Cinema Collective? That's the question. I honestly cannot make a prediction, but I do know that the men of these industries are a little scared that there's a possibility of the status quo changing, which is why they are silent. Do you see the difference, Sandeep?
Yes.
A doctor is raped and murdered in Kolkata, and doctors across the country are protesting. A Hema Committee report comes out on the Malayalam film industry's women's plight, and where are the film personalities across the rest of the country? Why are they silent? Why are they not expressing solidarity with their women colleagues in the Malayalam film industry? You and I know why they're not, because they're afraid that if they do that, then we will ask questions to them also.
Absolutely.
So I can't make a prediction, but I hope.
We live in hope, Anna, and the conspiracy of silence, as you spoke, that's something that we're going to keep coming back to. But we were talking about Mollywood's dirty old men, and indeed the dirty old men, this cabal of power that's been exposed by the Hema Committee report has finally met its match in the brave women of the WCC. We'll have to wait and watch if this movement spreads across the country, as Brinda Adige and Anna Vetticad have been telling us this evening. But thank you very much, ladies, for joining us on this very burning topic of the dirty old men in the Malayalam film industry and possibly across India as well. US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan recently termed the killing of pro-Khalistan figure Hardeep Singh Nijjar last year as an assassination. Now, Canada has accused India of killing Nijjar in 2023. NSA Sullivan also referred to an attempted assassination in the United States as well. He was alluding to an attempt to kill Gurpatwant Singh Pannu. The US has said that an Indian official allegedly directed gangster Nick Gupta to carry out the foiled assassination. Now, is this a US strategy to use these cases as a lever to make India comply and do its bidding? Joining me to discuss this are Pramit Pal Chaudhuri, foreign expert at the Eurasia Group, Nirmal Abraham, political analyst and US expert, and in the studio with me is my colleague Aditya Raj Kaul. Pramit, I want to start by asking you this: the timing of the statement, NSA Jake Sullivan once again brings back the assassination spectre. Is this going to be a lever that the US is going to use to bring New Delhi, to get some compliance out of New Delhi?
Well, I think there are two things to it. One, the Biden administration now is obviously on its last legs.
Right.
And it is not clear that Biden definitely will no longer be president. And if Trump is president, Sullivan will not be part of the administration. And it is not clear that Sullivan would necessarily continue or be given a position if Kamala Harris is president. She has her own foreign policy team led by Philip Gordon. So Sullivan in many ways is saying his goodbye. So what you tend to see at the end of an administration is a lot of interviews and statements and so on by outgoing officials who are trying to set up a legacy or talking frankly about their problems. You saw, for example, recently the Financial Times had a full one-page on Jake Sullivan's back channel between the US and China. Yes. And that was basically Sullivan tooting his horn and setting up his legacy as I leave of the White House. So I suspect him talking openly about assassination is part of that story. So I don't think it should put too much into this. This is a lame duck administration. Right. So what it says and what it does now really doesn't matter that much. Now, my sense, though, broadly on the question of assassination is, yes, the Americans are saying you assassinated Nijjar, and you probably attempted to assassinate Panun. Is that a bad thing? Because America carries out assassinations as well. From what I understand, the Americans don't have a problem with India carrying out assassination. Their argument is slightly different, which is that you need to have a certain structure in handling assassinations. In other words, you cannot have a situation where 2 or 3 bureaucrats or a senior intelligence officer more or less decides to kill a foreign citizen without any due process. So in America, and of course the country that is the assassination superpower, which is Israel, there is a process. You have to go through a certain, it's all internal, it's secret obviously, but they have a judicial structure, they have a tribunal that discusses it, looks at the evidence and says, yes, this person is a genuine. And I think from what I understand, the Americans have quietly told you, we don't have an issue with assassination, though we do have a problem if you try to kill an American citizen. What we do have a problem is that if you are going to be a great power, assassination has to be done through a procedure. Otherwise, it will be abused. And that's what we would really like you to do. And I think Kurt Campbell, the U.S. Deputy Secretary of State, in an earlier interview, basically said that what we are urging India to do is make it institutionalized. If you're going to do this kind of stuff, make it professional.
Interesting observations there, Pramit. How do you, streamline this? Assassinations, Aditya, streamline it, structure it of the kind that the US has been suggesting, and of course, Pramit has mentioned the US and of course Israel being assassination superpowers. The US has assassinated its own citizen. If you remember, Anwar al-Awlaki in Yemen many years ago, he was killed by a drone strike. He was a US citizen. Do you see any weight in this? Do you see the government of India actually looking at a policy of assassinations and setting up a structure like that, of the kind that Pramit just mentioned? Or will it be these kind of small operations where not many people are involved? Because, I mean, let's face it, at the end of the day, the systems are entirely different in the US, in Israel, and in India. And I think India does a lot of things in a way that other countries wouldn't do it. But what's your take on this?
Well, perhaps we are waiting for a book from the United States on the art of the right assassination, or the Assassin's Right Guidebook. But as of now, I feel that, of course, the Americans or the West as such does not like if there are countries in the global south or, developing economies who engage or indulge in acts which are not as per the procedure, process, or the so-called democracy of the West. So I agree with Pramit when he says that, in the next few months, specifically 4 months to 5 months, the policy decisions in US or the kind of overtures or the kind of messaging that we'll see from Washington DC is not as much significant, because the atmosphere is of elections. There's more of messaging, signaling, which is done to attract the domestic audience, or as he said, maintaining a legacy. So we'll see more frequently, messages or interviews or comments that are certainly not aligned with what we think of ourselves or how we see the India-US dynamics or strategic bilateral partnership. But when it comes to the Khalistani element, or when it comes to the the gangsters or terrorists who are right now mostly in Canada, but also in US soil and UK, there has to be a growing understanding, which I see a lack of it in the Western world, of how these people are detrimental to India's interest, but also to their interest. They cannot, time and again, and they've been doing this for decades together, they cannot arm twist India anymore in agreeing to certain, perhaps defense ties, perhaps something else, to engage with India in such a manner that they arm twist India into it. There needs to be a growing realization that these elements are at their, on their soil, on their land, on their territories, and this is detrimental to their national security as well, as is visible in Canada. I mean, look at the situation. Of course, there are other reasons, primarily economy, for Justin Trudeau's bad image currently. But there are 70%, the voting trends right now suggest that 70% of Canadians are against Justin Trudeau. And one of the issues is, of course, the security element there, the gangland violence that is happening. People feel insecure. And there is a reverse trend. I mean, over the last 3 decades, we saw Indians and many people from this part of the world going to Canada, getting a PR, job security there and a better quality of life. Now there are people moving out of Canada because they do not feel secure and they do not see healthcare, public infrastructure, or a long-term future in Canada.
Migration out of Canada as well. But Nirmal Abraham, this point that Pramit raised, very important one, the way he says that, this is the Biden administration doing its goodbyes, and it's Jake Sullivan trying to say that, hey, this is what I did for the last 4 years. This is my legacy. Are the Pannoon attempted assassination and the Nijjar assassination, killing of Nijjar, are they going to remain, are they going to carry forward to the next administration, be it a Kamala Harris administration or a Trump administration, or will it end with the Biden presidency? What's your take on this?
I see it slightly differently because it's got more to do with the relationship between Canada and the United States than the relationship between India and the United States. So if you look at Canada, and the first question we should all ask is, how did Nijjar get the citizenship? Because he had a large criminal record, number one. Number two, he forged his name in his passport. Number three, he illegally entered Canada, yet he got a citizenship. That's a question we should ask Canada. The thing about the United States and Canada is they've had a long-standing relationship, especially a trading relationship. They're the largest. They have the largest and the most comprehensive trading relationship in the world. Plus, they also are the single largest foreign electricity supply, energy supply to the US. So there are other things at stake as well beyond just security. So maintaining that relationship with Canada is something that US will give priority to. That's one. And two, as far as US's double standard is concerned, we're seeing it everywhere, not just with India. You see it with the Israel-Palestine war and the Russia-Ukraine war, where Ukraine is the victim, Palestine is also the victim. But for some reason, in the Israel-Palestine war, they support the aggressor, and the Russia-Ukraine war, they support the victim. So as far as the US is concerned, double standards is not anything new. As far as terrorism is concerned, specifically on this issue, I think the Nijjar issue, America is bound to do that because they are having close ties with Canada. They would love to maintain that tie. But politically speaking, if you ask me, if Trump comes to power, there could be a slight change of opinion because if you know, the political alignment of Canada and the US are the same. They're both either center-left or left-wing parties at the moment. But when Trump comes into power, it could change because Trump is not a big fan of Trudeau or does not align politically with Canada's ruling party at the moment. And the other reason that they have to do it, again, from the other angle, if Trudeau is ousted from power, this changes. Because the reason why Trudeau is pressing for this is because of the NDP, National Democratic Party's leader, Talvinder Singh Parmar, who is a Khalistani sympathizer, who pressurizes Trudeau because he's the reason why Trudeau is in power. If he withdraws his share of seats, Trudeau is ousted immediately. So he knows that he has to please Khalistani sympathizers, so he has to take that stand. And for that reason, US will also support Canada, is what I think.
Right, absolutely. So, Pramit, the Khalistan factor is the elephant in the room, literally, between, in this triangular relationship between India, Canada, and the United States. Give our viewers an idea what it was like in the 80s, because this seems to be like a back to the 80s kind of scenario where you had a certain Khalistani element there that was also fomenting acts of terror on Indian soil, and indeed they carried out the Kanishka attacks.
I think a couple of key points to keep in mind. The Khalistani movement doesn't exist in India. There is almost no support for the Khalistanis, even in Punjab. The Akalis have been the political allies of the BJP. No Khalistani leader could ever win an election even in Punjab. Forget about the rest of India. So this has now become a diaspora movement, and it's three subcastes of the Jats sociologically, and many of those who migrated to flee when the Khalistan movement began to collapse in India and fled to places like Canada, which is why it has survived in a small group, but has now become integrated, at least especially in Canada, not so much in the UK and Australia, integrated with organized crime. Because what has happened in Canada, as directly was pointed out earlier, we've seen not just Nijjar, but the original organized crime domination of Canada used to be Colombians and Chinese. And now it is Sikhs, it is the Khalistanis who have taken over. They are the biggest organized crime network in Canada now. And this has become a lethal combination, and then combined with the sort of vote bank politics that Trudeau is playing in Canada. What is good, as has been mentioned, Trudeau is struggling politically, and Canada's economy, bizarrely, given it's such a resource-rich nation, is not doing well. And one of the things I think the Indian government is just sitting there is saying, we'll wait until Trudeau leaves. Because by next year, with the fully expectation is that Trudeau will no longer be prime minister. He literally scraped through in the last election only because he was able to form an alliance, a coalition government. But he's deeply unpopular, and that the Conservative Party candidates who are coming in are making it clear that they will have no brook with Khalistanis in terror. They will also obviously not support somebody trying to kill a Canadian citizen. But what I think is very clear, if you look at what's happening between India and Canada, the governments are signaling to each other. Nijar episode is over on the official level. We are not changing anything on the economic front. If you look, for example, at Canadian pension funds, they're among the largest investors in India. Canada, in many ways, is almost on the same size as the United States in the amount of investment. And when I've talked to Canadian investors, they said we've been struck by that in the height of all of these problems, we would go to the Indian government. The Indian government said, your investments are perfectly safe. We do not have a problem with Canada. We have a problem with Trudeau. Let's make this very clear. There is no fundamental reason why India and Canada should be at. So the assumption is that, therefore, the diaspora elements that are being given a certain free rein by the Trudeau government will effectively be contained over time. And what I have understood is that when the Americans and the Canadians have talked about this, the Americans have gone through it and told them, the Canadians, look, you're our ally and we will support you. But let's understand this. The Indians are absolutely right. 2/3 of the terrorist attacks in Punjab, and they were really minor to be fair, but attacks on police stations and so on, were traced back to Canada. And you didn't do anything. You were in violation of the FATF rules. You were in violation of what any Western democracy should be doing under your own laws. So India may have gone too far as the US is concerned, but let's understand they have a reason for why they did this. And you guys in Canada need to get your act together, because America cannot tolerate, will be wary about something like that happening even on its own soil.
Interesting perspective there. And Aditya, you think that things will change, as Pramit was mentioning, the fact that regime change in Canada, the upcoming change of guard in Washington as well, that could actually change this entire dynamic between India, United States and Canada?
Absolutely, no doubts about that. I mean, we traditionally have had good ties with US and Canada. There are historic ties, there are people-to-people contacts, there are strategic partnerships, there's trade, one of the most significant. But there are elections. The elections later this year in US, in which, of course, it's a very tight contest as of now, as is being predicted. Although till a few weeks back, it was almost clear that Trump is going to return. But we'll see. And India is also monitoring that very closely over the next 4 months. Of course, people say that Trump could be a little more better than Kamala Harris, even though Kamala Harris has Indian origins, but Democrats being Democrats. And on the other hand, Canada has a very interesting contest that is lined up against Justin Trudeau, with Pierre Poilievre emerging as a very strong contestant, the current leader of opposition, a very fantastic speaker, also someone who has great ties with the Indian diaspora out there, with the Hindu community and with the Indian government. So there are a lot of Indian conservative MPs also who are with him. So we'll have to wait and watch how he walks that tightrope when it comes to India, because he's also not entirely pro or against Khalistanis. But as of now, of course, India will be monitoring these two elections very closely, both in India and Canada.
Of course, India would be monitoring those elections in the United States and Canada very closely, because as our guests have just told us, that the US-Canada doublespeak could well be a result of the politics of the United States and, of course, of Canada. But that's something that we'll be looking at very closely here. Thank you very much for joining us, Pramit Pal Chaudhuri, Nirmal Abraham, and my colleague Aditya Raj Kaul.